First of all, one thing it should be very clear: Turkey-Pakistan relations is deep-seated. It is multifaceted and multi-layered, and it dates back to many years ago. It has a long history. It's a tested relationship in all dimensions: socially, politically, economically, militarily. That's a special type of relationship that is there. That's why Turkey will be with Pakistan naturally. But with regard to the war that happened between, India and Pakistan, and then Indian approach to Turkey, I think yes, Turkey has contributed. Turkey was there, but the big player was there in China. I think everybody agrees on that. But India, instead of attacking or blaming China, unfortunately they blame on Turkey. That is something, of course, that would be good for the public perceptions. Public consumptions in India. There are special relations that exist in global politics. For example, Turkey-Azerbaijan relations, Israel-United States relations. There are like Turkey-Pakistan relations. There are special relations. But also we should understand there is a common widespread understanding that transactional relations is becoming a normal in other countries, which is Turkey is also having with many other countries. I'm sure many other countries they are having these transactional relations with others. But when there is deep social connections between societies, deep social connections, and in that context, any political party or any leader who is leading the country, you cannot ignore those deep-seated relations. In my understanding, I think the issue in Syria will take some time, but we all expect a sustainable Syria. That there is a unwritten agreement between Turkey, United States, and the Gulf countries that secure Syria, a stable Syria is the benefit for all of us. Israel has objections because Israel wants a weak and not really strong Syria. That is the case of Syria. But the case in Gaza is totally unknown because we don't know whether we will have a lasting solutions. It does not depend neither on Turkey nor Gulf countries or other countries. Although many of them they agree that we should have a lasting solution. It mostly depends on the United States and Israel. If they don't act as disruptively, especially if the United States can prevent Israel not to be disruptive in Gaza again or not to start the war, perhaps we will see. But for Gaza, for many of us here, is an unknown. We don't know. There is a ceasefire agreement. They present us as a peace agreement, but we all know it's a ceasefire agreement.
Watch Federal Post. Bold and independent.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Talking Politics. This is Hassan Zafar, and we have Professor Dr. Mehmet Özkan. He's joining us from Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you very much, Doctor, for giving us time today. Let's begin by talking about India-Pakistan war that took place in May this year. And Turkey supplied weapons to Pakistan, drones primarily. And there was a backlash from India against Turkey. They discontinued their tourism with Turkey and other ties. They were downgraded. But very strangely, China also provided weapons to Pakistan, and India had no problem with that. Russia and France provided weapons to India. Pakistan had no problem with that. But why such special treatment accorded to Turkey from the Indian people and their government?
Dr. Zafar, thank you very much for the invitation. First of all, one thing it should be very clear: Turkey-Pakistan relations is deep-seated. It is multifaceted and multi-layered, and it dates back to many years ago. It has a long history. It's a tested relationship in all dimensions: socially, politically, economically, militarily. That's a special type of relationship that is there. That's why Turkey will be with Pakistan naturally. But with regard to the war that happened between, India and Pakistan, and then Indian approach to Turkey, I think yes, Turkey has contributed. Turkey was there, but the big player was there in China. I think everybody agrees on that. But India, instead of attacking or blaming China, unfortunately they blame on Turkey. That is something, of course, that would be good for the public perceptions. Public consumptions in India, but it was unfair. That I should say that. But also, sometimes in India there is a perception that as if Turkey follows its foreign policy in Asia through the prism of Pakistan. Yes, Pakistan is Turkey's friend. We have good communication, good relations, but that does not prevent Turkey having different relations with different countries in Asia, including with China, other countries, and everything. Exactly same thing happening between in Turkey's relations with Russia and the United States. Sometimes United States Americans are not agree that Turkey is having good relation with Russia, but we are having good relations. So there is a misperception that exists actually in India. As I mean, Turkey they should realize that in Turkey is acting alone. Turkey India relations is different. Turkey Pakistan relations is special and different. So I mean, nobody's going having relations through its other side's prism. So it's a different relations. Yes, they are friends. They speak to each other. Unfortunately, I call it Turkey bashing. Turkey bashing has been very much popular in India after the war, and I've seen terrible articles they wrote in the media, including hosting, anti-Turkish groups, including terror group like FETÖ, different things. But I think it was a miscalculated and not correct attack on creating a Turkey bashing environment. I mean, that was wrong. I think that also prevents both sides to understand each other. But as I say, I mean, two things should be very clear. Turkey-Pakistan relations is different, special. That's one side, and Turkey-India relations is different. It can develop on certain points and everything. Also, Turkey having relations with India would be beneficial for the regional issues as well, as there are changes happening in Bangladesh and other places in the regions. From
Right.
Turkey, after the war, for example, we followed in the media and other discussion in the regions. But believe me, in Turkish media, there was not so much discussion on what Indians are thinking about Turkey. Most of them did not even pay attention. We understood and we knew that it was mostly for uh, public consumptions, and at the same time, it was motivated with the ruling elites' perception on Turkey and on Muslims. I mean, I can see there is a deep-seated, perhaps, Islamophobia that exists. That is why, I mean, we read through that lines. But otherwise, I mean, Turkey's approach to Asia is like multi-faced now. It is developing. Turkey has an Asian foreign policy towards Asia, and Turkey wants to develop relations with all actors and all continents. The level and depth of that relations depends on historical relations and different issues. And in Asia, Turkey-Pakistan relations stands specifically special. So
Yeah.
that's what I can say in terms of Turkey's approach to those developments in the region.
It feels special, which brings us to the question of transactional relationships, that nations have their relationships based on interest. Uh, do you fully agree with this notion that nations have only transactional relationship? There is nothing like shared history, common sense of identity. These things are secondary. By all means, transactional relationship. What you can do for me, what I can do for you in return. It is entirely based on that.
No, I don't agree 100%, but I mean, there are special relations that exist in global politics. For example, Turkey-Azerbaijan relations, Israel-United States relations. There are like Turkey-Pakistan relations. There are special relations. But also we should understand there is a common widespread understanding that transactional relations is becoming a normal in other countries, which is Turkey is also having with many other countries. I'm sure many other countries, they are having these transactional relations with others. But when there is deep social connections between societies, deep social connections, and in that context, any political party or any leader who is leading the country, you cannot ignore those deep-seated relations. So what I can say, I think yes, although we can say transnational relations is becoming much more popular and important, but we cannot ignore those deep-seated relations. So finding a perfect balance, is the test for many nation states now in today in global politics in their foreign policy.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you think that this whole notion of transactional relationships, it's a Western concept and it's being imposed on the non-Western nations to fracture their special relationships, the historical relationship, cultural ties, and all that, which have existed in this region for centuries. So the Western notion is being imposed on these societies.
You know, transaction relations is basically a trading state concept. I mean, trading business wise, political foreign relations. Yes, I agree. Western countries they focus recently on mostly transaction relations because they know that international liberal order has lost its value. We see lots of hypocrisy, lots of double standard, and the values that they were trying to impose others. Now they are no longer defending that values. We have seen that in Gaza, in other places. So we see that clearly. In transaction relations, focusing too much on that is a way of avoiding those traps that they should be blamed for not supporting any values. But at the same time, that's becoming normal. Why? Because this strategic alliance or the alliance concept is transforming. Many countries they are transforming economically, politically, socially, but that does not mean that deep seated relations should not exist. Still, I think deep seated relations will exist, will continue to exist, but at the same time, with other countries, there is no deep seated relations. There is state to state relations. Perhaps there are areas to develop relations. Transaction relations is a way to forward. At the same time, I mean, two countries between each other, they don't have to solve all problems. So if there are crises, permanent issues, and permanent problems, the best way would be to have transaction relations, which means to expand the positive agenda between the state. In that sense, that is very clear. But as I said, I mean, deep state relations will be reality. Deep cultural and religious relations will continue to play a key role in coming years as well in global politics. But at the same time, we should realize that there is a transforming type of concept of foreign relations both in the west and the non-west, because we are heading towards value free global politics, unfortunately. Everything is double
So there
standard
is
and
going to
everything
be
that is forcing us.
a balance between transactional relationship and transformative relationship that needs to be taken into account. Uh, you mentioned special relationship between the United States and Israel, and we have seen a reflection of that kind of relationship between India and Israel. So when India was bashing, in your words, the Indian media was bashing Turkey. You think it had something to do with India's relationship with Israel, and it was dictated by that special relationship, how India was behaving with Turkey?
I think I mean, if when we look at that could have some type of impact. But in India, I mean, India-Turk relations uh, did not go well. I mean, there has been communications, especially with the BGP and the Modi's government. Relations did not go. I mean, still there are lots of different approach to Turkey. Most of the Indians they look at Turkey through the prism of Greek Cypriots. Sometimes they look at through the prism of Israel. Sometimes they see prism of other countries, and sometimes even Armenia. So those negative approach to Turkey was easy for them to justify. And when the war happened between Pakistan and India, so it created a momentum for them to bash Turkey, literally. I mean, to criticize Turkey, uh, to question Turkey's approach in the region. But as I said, I mean, these things happens. I don't see. I mean, these things happen. I mean, even before the war, Indian approach to Turkey was almost similar. Did not change. So it just become much more visible, much more produced in the media, reproduced in the social media, and even we have seen they cancel the contracts for some Turkish companies. They try to block the tourism that's coming from India to Turkey. Uh, but that did not change any reality on the ground. So I think still what I understand, there is a misperception in India about Turkey. That is totally wrong. They look at Turkey through different countries' prisms, which is not really correct. Unfortunately, that's the case. Yes, Israel and other countries also may have had some impact on that. I mean, which is normal given the relations between India and Israel is perfectly well. That could have had some impact as well.
Yeah. Let's move on to the Middle East situation, uh, starting with fall of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And after that, we saw that Turkey had a greater role to play in whatever was happening in Syria. Uh, how does Turkey position itself in relation to the larger context in the Middle East, uh, with Syria in focus?
Dr. Zafar, I mean, Turkey after the Arab Spring, when the Arab Spring started 2010, Turkey's position, of course, was to support the democratic process in the Middle East. But now Turkey and all the other countries in the region are entering the post-Arab Spring era, which means end all the wars, end the civil wars, and to create a sustainable and secure state. The 8th of December 2024, when the regime of Bashar Assad fall down, it was, uh, it was partly by Turkish help to opposition as well. It was clear, everybody knows that. And Turkey's position towards foreign policy towards Syria is very clear. It should be Syrians own the policy, which means Syrians should take over their own country. They decide, they rule the country, they should establish their security state. So they should be able to create a security zone for themselves. That is why Turkey is contributing whatever it can, but Turkey is not forcing anything, neither to Ahmed al Shara or others. That's why Ahmed al Shara is having relations with Russia. He was in Russia recently, with Gulf countries, with the United States, with other countries, because that is their own choice. That for us, the key issue is that there should be a secure Syria. They should not create any security problem for Turkey. That is the main concern of Turkey. We know that any legitimate and any socially acceptable government in Syria will be naturally friends of Turkey, because lots of millions of people they were in Turkey. Now some of them they are going back. This social to social bond is very strong between Turkey and Syria. That's main approach. With regard to other issues in the Middle East, the main policy of Turkey is to try to solve the problems. As you know, Turkey is playing a key role in Libya now, speaking to both sides, both in Tripoli and Benghazi. Uh, Probably they will be coming together for a possible solutions. Turkey is mediating that in a way, and also Turkey is trying to a mediation role also in Sudan. So the issue is to enter the Spring post-Arab Spring era, which means to end the wars, because these regions had enough wars, and unfortunately, the last 2 years, what we have seen in Gaza uh, was uh, was much more than what can be true actually in the region. The genocide that has taken place, and unfortunately, many countries they just observe it, Western countries. Now there is a ceasefire there, and Turkey is also focusing there along with many other countries in the region to create a sustainable and suitable, peaceful solution in Gaza, that there will be Palestinian state established, because more than 150 countries they recognize the establishment of Palestinian state as a state. So that's the main focus. But unfortunately, that depends. It depends to prevent the aggressive Israel. Israel has been extremely aggressive in the region. They try to expand their influence, attacking different countries, different regions. That will depend on the Trump. That's why Turkey is also having very good relation with Trump to prevent Israel to be aggressive, and at least being a non-disruptive country in with regard to solutions in the region. So overall, Turkish foreign policy in the region, now wars should end. There should be a peaceful solution to all of them. There should be order and regional stability in the region, because people here are fed up with the wars. They no longer want war. They want economically and politically sustainable and legitimate states. That is what Turkey is supporting. That's why it's good that Turkey and Gulf countries they are coordinating now much more than comparing to several years ago. It's good that Turkey-Europe relations and Turkey-United States relations is on good terms, comparing to many issues in the region, despite several differences. So Turkey is trying to utilize its own influence, militarily, soft power, or relational-wise, to bring the stability to the region. That is the main foreign policy of Turkey to the Middle East.
Right, because despite the peace agreement in Gaza, situation seems to be far from settled there. Uh, Israeli Israeli atrocities continue to take place from time to time on a regular basis. That has not stopped. The suffering of the people in Gaza has not stopped. Uh, but uh, we have our fingers crossed, waiting for something you know, lasting to happen there. At the same time, Ahmad al-Shara in Syria, the erstwhile known as a militant, now is heading the government there, and the United States is quite easy on him. He's being invited to the United States for talks. Uh, and Sudan, you mentioned, Sudan recently confronted United Arab Emirates in Security Council over their support for the uh, civil unrest there, the opposition party. So a lot appears to be unsettled in the region where you exist. Where do you think the whole situation is heading if the same thing continues?
In my understanding, I think the issue in Syria will take some time, but we all expect a sustainable Syria. That there is a unwritten agreement between Turkey, United States, and the Gulf countries that the secure Syria, stable Syria, is the benefit for all of us. Israel has objections because Israel wants a weak and not really strong Syria. That is the case of Syria. But the case in Gaza is totally unknown because we don't know whether we will have a lasting solutions. It does not depend neither on Turkey nor Gulf countries or other countries. Although many of them they agree that we should have a lasting solution, it mostly depends on the United States and Israel. If they don't act as disruptively, especially if the United States can prevent Israel not to be disruptive in Gaza again or not to start the war, perhaps we will see. But for Gaza, for many of us here, is an unknown. We don't know. There is a ceasefire agreement. They present us as a peace agreement, but we all know it's a ceasefire agreement, and we don't know whether the war will start again in 1 month, 2 months. So nobody knows its future. That's one. That's very clear. But we are all observing from Turkey and everywhere. We are all observing that how and in what way we can have a lasting and sustainable solution. That is the interest of everyone of us. That's what we are following. And the case in Libya, probably we expect in coming months some sort of sustainable solutions, but that's also unclear because that requires international involvement, international support. There is oil there. There are different economic interests. So that's another issue that we are all looking at. Uh, the issue in Sudan, it was relatively going well, but it went out of control recently because of the El Fashir and everything, all the videos that came out. And whether many people are speaking, whether we will have another divided Sudan. Unfortunately, that's what we see. So it's going out of control. Lots of mercenaries are there. They are operating on behalf of Hemeti, and it's getting worse. Actually, it's getting now. We were thinking Gaza was the worst. Now we are getting another worse scenario in Sudan, complicated. But overall, I think in these conflicts, we should understand that only regional countries they can get together, they can solve this. Sometimes there has been competition between between the countries in the region on these conflicts. They have taken different approach, like Turkey, Egypt, Emirates, and other countries. But I think now everybody is slowly coming to understand that none of them can really impose its own perspective and agenda on that. And if the conflict continues, it is poisoning the region. It is creating more turbulence, more problem. That's why, starting with Syria, everybody came to this conclusion, and I hope second will be Libya, and I hope Sudan and others can follow for a possible and lasting solutions on that. That is the overall framework I can give. But lasting without the support of the international community and the United States, none of the agreements here, none of the process here cannot be sustainable because Trump's position, American support, has become extremely key for a variety of reasons, for the international support, for the recognitions, and also for the other countries to follow up easily. And that's why many countries in the region, they pay so much attention to their relations with Trump. If you can get Trump on the board, you can possibly find the lasting solutions in these conflicts.
Yes. Uh, we understand that the United States has a very important role, rather central role to play in the Middle East because of their ties and influence with those countries. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the importance of other powers, Russia, China in the region, because they have a lot of stakes, not only in the Middle East, but also in Africa, especially China, because of their BRI project and all that. So you think without these powers in the picture, some meaningful, logical, lasting solution is possible, and especially how should Turkey look at their role in the region as a NATO member?
In this all these conflicts, China is saying basically if Chinese interest is protected economically, China does not have so much perspective uh, to the political solutions. In a way, how the political solution is framed. That is why, but the United States is very much interested how the political frame is organized in solving these conflicts and crises. Yes, of course, Chinese support will be, especially in the case of Sudan, it will be important, but many consider as a secondary in that one. With regard to China, Russia has been very active both in Syria and Libya and other parts. But with the war in Ukraine, Russia has withdrawn most of its influence from here to its own focus in Ukraine. And yeah, now Russia wants to come back. Ahmed El Shara visited Moscow recently, and he wants to be back in 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 Syria. But it would be unrealistic to expect that Russia will have similar influence as it was in the past in Syria. Russia will have certain influence, but probably more positive and productive role he will play compared in the past. That's one thing. But same in Libya, same in other places. Many countries in they don't feel so much a negative or strong Russian influence as it was in the past in the region. That's why we all look at the regional countries and the United States and part of the Europeans to legitimize these processes. But many people, consider Russia and China as a secondary influential power in these conflicts in the region.
So, what do you think is the major geopolitical challenge for Turkey at the moment? Is that in the West and Eastern Europe because of Ukraine war there, or is it East, Middle East, because of the Gaza situation and of course Iran-Israel conflict that we witnessed in June this summer?
The biggest challenge for Turkey is the case of Syria, because there are lots of security issues coming from Syria for Turkey. So a sustainable Syria is a key for Turkey's security. That is number one agenda for Turkey's security and everything. That's one thing. That's one
Right.
geopolitical challenge Turkey is facing. Turkey is facing. And second one is the relations between United States and Russia, and or between West and Russia, West and the rest. Turkey wants to situate itself in between these powers, having relations with both of them, and sometimes trying to be mediator. As Turkey, played some meetings that took place between Ukrainians and the Russians in Istanbul. That's why Turkey is trying to create a delicate balance between this power. So Turkey does not want to be pushed by one side to another or to do something. That is Turkey's strategic autonomy that Turkey focuses. And Turkey, yes, Turkey says, it says, for example, in the case of Ukraine, Turkey says clearly that territorial unity of Ukraine is extremely important. Turkey is saying to Russia, and the war should stop. But at the same time, that does not, mean that Turkey should cut its relations with Russia. Turkey, for example, is not following the embargo or sanctions on Russia. So the biggest challenge is regionally the case in Syria, and possible implication of the other conflicts, and globally trying to continue this delicate balance between West and the Russia-China dilemma in a way. And so far, Turkey is managing that very well. But as time goes on, we don't know what type of challenges that can bring to Turkey, or what type of, issues on crisis, or sometimes, decisions Turkey should be forced to take. But Turkey does not want to give up its relations with both sides. And to continue this delicate balance is the key geopolitical balance at global level for Turkey for now.
We just witnessed that after the United States asked NATO members to raise their own militaries and raise their military budgets up to 5% of their GDP. And after that, because Turkey has a growing defense industry, it is very well positioned to supply arms and weapons to its NATO allies. Do you think there is a growing military cooperation between Turkey and other NATO members? Turkey is in a very good position to arm its NATO allies, especially the fifth gen aircraft which Turkey is building. So,
Yes, as you remember, in the last NATO summit in Holland, they have agreed on several points. One is, yes, all the countries should raise, their military spending to 5% of their GDP. And second was that defense cooperation between NATO members, all the obstacles to that should be eliminated. That was one thing that was in the communique when they released that after the meeting. So uh, now we can see Turkey's defense cooperation with other countries. For example, some Turkish defense companies they signed agreement with Italian companies, and also Turkey has recently bought Eurofighter from Europe. So what we can see as the spending increase to the 5% of each NATO members, Turkey will take its own place in that transformations, both as a possible provider of the security in terms of defense equipment, and at the same time Turkey will be buying them from them as well. So what happened as the NATO relocates itself as the global security provider and the defense equipment provider, they relocate themselves in transforming global politics. I think Turkey will take a much better positions as Turkish defense industry has developed in last 10 years extensively, from Khan, fifth generation airplanes to Altay tank and all the other equipments, drones and everything. I think now Turkey is focusing on that. Turkey will be benefiting economically, and Turkey will be the key contributor to the NATO NIV security structure that is evolving now in here. And I think many countries, including Trump, they recognize that very well, and they pay special attention to Turkey because they don't want Turkey. There is a tendency that they see Turkey's defense industry's development as an advantage to the NATO and Western countries, not an obstacle to that, because it will be naturally benefit for the European and NATO system as well, because Turkey is part of the NATO since 1952, and all the equipments is designed and developed here with NATO standards. I think that I expect some good positive developments in coming years and more cooperations. Some of them willingly, some of them by force of geopolitical transformations.
are you saying that some of those countries have any concerns and apprehensions about Turkey's growing military capability and defense production capability? They're not very happy with the way Turkey is making advances in that sector.
Yes, as you know, this sector is extremely competitive and it's a very expensive sector. Yes, some countries are not happy, but I think Turkey has crossed to threshold now. Turkey has proved himself that Turkey is a key actor in this industry. And today, for example, more than 80% of the Turkish defense industry, they are local. They are produced in Turkey. So its aim is to increase this to 90-95% in coming years. And Turkey has established itself as one of the key security provider in many countries in Africa, in other countries, in terms of military equipment. IHA, SIHA, all these drones and everything. So I think Turkey came to a point that it will be irreversible in terms of defense industry capacity and defense industry producers. That will be accepted slowly by other countries. It is like let me give an example. It's like a country when they have nuclear weapons. It's difficult for the others to accept. It takes time. So I think it's a similar situation in defense industry. It's not easy for others to accept, but as time passes, they are forced to accept and cooperate. That's the only way to cope them and to understand those developments.
We also heard some cooperation with Pakistan, joint production of some aircrafts between Pakistan and Turkey. Do you have any knowledge of it? This kind of talks between the two countries?
What I know is that Turkey is now with many countries trying to produce regional productions. I know some Turkish companies, they have offices in Pakistan, in Malaysia, in some African countries, in other countries. I know there are cooperations, but I'm not aware of that level of that cooperations. I mean, the depth of it. But what I know is that Turkey is willing to cooperate with third countries because that will be mutual sharing of the experience and everything. And with Pakistan, it is a natural choice that both countries cooperate on this.
Right. Dr. Özkan, one last question, and for that we turn our attention back to India, Pakistan. There has been talk in Indian media uh, about Turkey that the Turkish mindset is that they want to restore the caliphate, the Ottoman Empire. They are expansionists and they want to expand their influence across the region, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Iran, everywhere. So, how would you respond to this one?
I think if someone hears this discussion in Turkey, in streets in Turkey, people will laugh at it because in Turkey there is no such mindset exists. What happens? Turkey is expanding its relations with many countries, Muslim countries, non-Muslim countries, Africa, Asia, Latin America, and that is natural that Turkey have relations with all those countries. Uh, but Turkey considers that those all type of relations are bilateral relations. It's a equal relations. It's a win-win relations, and you cannot force any country for any concept. History is the past. Yes, we look at the future. In the future, if these countries cooperate or coordinate something, whatever it's called, I mean, cooperation, coordination, acting together, that's different story. But in Turkish mindset, I mean, there is no Khalifat, there is no such discussion, there is no such debate, even in Turkish media and everything. Sometimes I'm
So
surprised when
the Indian media
when I
just cook it themselves, the whole story, it is cooking in their minds. And they're also talking about Operation Sindoor 2, 2.0. In your
I think
assessment, yes,
that
yes, in
even
your
though,
assessment, this Operation Sindoor 2 is possible?
discussion on Khilafat in India, I mean, I can see that shows the unfortunately lack of deep knowledge on Turkey. I mean, that's how they know Turkey. I think that's not really correct, and everybody will know very well. Whomever you speak from Turkey or from the region or from another country.
Yes, yes. But the Operation Sindoor 2, 2.0, you think that is happening? It has some reality. From how does it look from Ankara, the
Uh,
current situation?
I think that's the forced situation. That's possibly we don't see as really reasonable and sustainable.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Mehmet Özkan, for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you. Best wishes for you and Turkish people and for Turkey itself. Thank you so much once again, and thank you very much for watching.